The black belt called out across the gym, his voice cutting through the sound of bodies hitting mats and the sharp slap of gloves on pads. "Hey, you yeah, the guy cleaning. How about a quick sparring match, just for fun?" The room went. Still, the challenge hanging in the air like the moment before a storm. Derek Mitchell stood in the center of the mat, his black belt tied tight around his waist, gleaming under the unforgiving fluorescent lights. His smirk was a practice one, the kind meant to draw laughs from students and to remind everyone who ran this place. "I bet you've never even seen a real fight in your life, right?" He added with a chuckle that was half invitation, half insult. James Washington, 42 years old, paused mid-swipe with his mop and slowly looked up. For 3 weeks, he'd been the quiet janitor, arriving after classes, emptying bins, and mopping sweat off mats long after the fighters had gone home. But tonight, the advanced class had run late. He set the mop head down on the wet tile floor. A moment and met Derek's eyes. "I don't want to bother you, Sensei," he said evenly, before turning back to work on a stubborn stain near the edge of the mat. Derek threw his head back and laughed, the sound loud and theatrical, meant for an audience. "Everyone, take a look at this." Afraid to even step on the mat. 8 students looked on, some smiling uneasily, others frowning at the tone. None of them knew that James had spent the last 20 years hiding from the man he used to be, from the life he'd left behind after one brutal night in the ring. Derek's voice sharpened as he stepped closer. "Come on, just a little demo. Show my students the difference between someone who trains and someone who just cleans floors." James straightened, setting the bucket aside. There was a subtle grace to his movements, the kind that comes from years of honing the body for battle. Those who were watching closely shifted, sensing something unusual. "All right," James said at last, his voice calm but firm. "But when we're done, you'll apologize to all of them for turning this mat into a circus." Derek grinned, but it wasn't quite as wide as before. He had no idea that the man he was taunting was James Silent Storm Washington, a 5-time world mixed martial arts champion who had walked away at the height of his career undefeated, after an accident in the ring claimed the life of his closest friend and training partner. The two men moved toward each other, the gym falling silent around them. Derek squared his shoulders, relishing the spotlight. "Everyone gather around," he said, gesturing for the students to form a circle. "You're about to see why there's a hierarchy in martial arts." James remained motionless, calm as still water, and that calm was more unnerving than any anger could have been. From the sidelines, Sarah Chun, a young purple belt, watched with growing unease. There was something in the way James breathed, the way his muscles seemed to hum beneath the surface, that reminded her of a predator poised to strike. Derek reached out and shoved James's shoulder lightly, a touch meant to provoke. James didn't move. It was like shoving a pillar of stone. The balance in the room shifted, something in Derek's smirk faltering. "You're not scared, are you?" Derek said, but there was a thread of uncertainty in his tone now. James's eyes narrowed just slightly. "It's been a long time since someone tried to provoke me like that." Derek smirked again, though his voice carried an edge. "Last chance. Step onto the mat for a demo, or I call security and you can find a new job." James's gaze locked on Derek's, steady and unblinking, and the smirk froze. "All right," he said softly. "But when we're done, you explain to them why you turned this place of learning into a sideshow." Derek attacked first a quick jab, followed by a straight punch, then a hook. His go-to combination, fast and polished. James wasn't there. He moved like water slipping around rocks, every strike cutting only air. "Clean technique," James observed, "but you telegraph with your right shoulder." Derek's jaw tightened, sweat began to form at his temples. He came again, faster, harder, but once more his opponent seemed to vanish with each strike. And then James stepped in, closing the distance in an instant. "Do you want to know the difference between someone who learned in a gym and someone who fought in professional rings?" he asked, without any obvious force, Without even seeming to try, James placed the palm of his hand against Derek's chest. The black belt was lifted off his feet and sent flying backwards, landing hard on the mat. Gasps echoed around the room. Derek lay staring at the ceiling, dazed, trying to process what had just happened. Sarah's phone was already out, her fingers moving quickly. Her eyes widened as the search results came up. James Washington, she read aloud, her voice carrying through the stunned silence. Also known as Silent Storm, 5-time world MMA champion. Retired undefeated. Every head turned toward James. Derek's voice when it came was small. I didn't know. James's reply was calm but sharp. If you had known, would you have treated me with respect? Or would you just have humiliated someone else? The words struck deeper than any punch could. 3 months later, the gym was unrecognizable. James was no longer mopping floors. He was on the mat, teaching advanced techniques and the philosophy behind them. Derek still taught, but at a smaller school, his arrogance tempered by the memory of that night. And James? He proved that true strength isn't measured by belts or titles, but by character. Sometimes the greatest victories don't come from knocking someone down, but from lifting everyone else up.